So I'm gonna sneak in a little intro here after recording the video because I realized that a lot of things that I say, what I'm trying to give you guys is the idea that there really isn't one way to do anything. Everything is very subjective and it comes from a lot of different people, from a lot of different backgrounds. There's people like James Park and James Pack, and there's also, they went to the best school, by the way. They went to Art Center, the school that's commonly thought of as the best school. Then we have Vitaly Bulgarov, Jama Jurabayev, and Maciej Kuchara, who we've seen before, and they were all self-taught. So the thing about that is that both strategies turn out to be valid. And why everything is so confusing, and this video will probably be confusing, is because both sides of the track work. And in my mind, there's no mistakes, but there are weaknesses and things that we avoid that turn into major delays. And the sooner you find those out, the quicker you dig them up and you go for them, the faster you can improve. So this video doesn't really have a single clear side that I could just say, do this and this is the best. I can only say there are many ways to do everything and find the best sequence that will work for you. So this is essentially the message of the video, and I'm giving you the end first so you can see the takeaways, and then hopefully by having those in mind, the things that I say may make more sense, but they may still not make any sense. I'll see you soon. Number one, have clarity and have focus. Number two, learn principles over techniques. And number three, be ruthlessly honest with what you're avoiding and go for your weakness mercilessly, even though that's the hardest thing to do because you want to stay safe. And the reason why it's a weakness is because you've never trained it. And the reason you've never trained it is because you didn't want to confront that you have a weakness. So get rid of that vicious cycle and get to work and get it done. It's the only way that at least I can think of that you'll be consistently improving and getting as much benefit as possible, not only in the short term, but in the long term too. I hope this video helped. I hope it confused you, because I really don't know how else to feel but confused about most of this stuff. And I hope that if you've been doing something that most other people have said not to do, maybe you might reconsider, and instead of feeling bad about it, maybe you could realize that this is something that you could use. Maybe not right now, but maybe once you unlock a few things, maybe this will be your new weapon. Hey everybody, Volen here, in pursuit of art. I disappeared for a couple weeks. No YouTube, no messages, no Gmail. Normally when that happens is when I've just discovered an entire new universe that I really suck in. So it takes me a couple weeks to just process, dude, how did I mess up, or how did I not see this? And then think about how to start improving and all those things that I thought that I was already good at, and then just start over. Okay, level 1, let's go again. This normally happens to me about, I'd say, every 6 months, and about every 6 months I'd reach a point where I've just learned something new, or I'm doing stuff in a new way, and I would kind of unconsciously think to myself, dude, we're getting there. Like, you are getting closer. And the smack in the face comes when I try something that I think I should be good at, or that I just try and do something that, I've been putting off for a while. And then I test it and I see that, okay, this is really not changed at all. So you may have just gone off and learned all this new stuff, but really in the larger scheme of things, you have moved. Like, you're always moving, but there's still a lot. There's still a lot that your stuff looks like a failing third grader's stuff. So there's really a lot more to be done. So I also saw one of the messages on Facebook asking if I could start over, what would I do? And since I was kind of asking myself a similar question at the time anyway, I thought maybe I'd just combine those and give you this video and hopefully make you a bit more confused about your own progress. Because really the one thing that I can't be sure of at all, ever, is clarity, right? That's why you always go this way and then that way, and this way and that way. And you can never really say which one is better. And that's because, in my mind, now, after about 3 years of doing this stuff, learning is a series of trade-offs. So if I start at ground zero, right, the way that I started, no previous experience at all. I didn't even watch movies because I didn't like them. I used to read books. I used to think that movies aren't as good, right? So zero visual education. I remember when I was in school, we had this still life thing we had to do, and I kind of drew this banana with outlines that everyone else's banana looked like a banana, but mine definitely didn't look like a banana. And there's not too much wrong that you can do with a banana outline, but I'd managed it, okay? So the only thing that I was good at was being bad at pretty much everything. So when I started, zero knowledge. So I wanted to learn everything. So if I had to give you my list of what would I do differently, clarity would probably be number one. So I've never really had clarity. I've always just wanted to learn everything. I've always wanted to know everything about everything. I want to know all the tools. I want to know all the different areas of design, let's say. I want to just learn as much as I can. I want to know it all. And even if I have to ask myself why that is, I'm not too sure, right? So the thing that I'm always lacking really is clarity. I can always see the next step. I can always see, let's say, 1 or 2 steps ahead. Well, I have this area to work on, and then I also have this thing to work on. I can always see that far, but I can't really see too far ahead. Now, if you follow some of the people that are out there, so I used to use Noah Bradley as a template because his stuff was just easy to see where he started. And before he deleted his Facebook page, you could pretty much see the journey. You could see where he was at every year, when he got to be a pro, how it happened, which piece was good enough. So I could just look at all his stuff. And by the way, if you go on DeviantArt, you could just find all that stuff there. So if you go Noah Bradley, DeviantArt, you can just scroll through his gallery, starting from the last page, and you can see some of his student stuff compared to his stuff now. And you can also get to see which are the pieces that separated him from when he became a pro, essentially. So I would have his work as a template, and I would be chasing his pieces in terms of quality, right? So Noah was this good at year whatever, how good am I at year whatever? But the thing is, the one thing that he did have, and that's why I actually can't compare to him, is because he had clarity about what he wants to do. He wanted to do environments, right? So he had a focus. So regardless of all the areas that he may not be as good as, he does have something that is clear. And also when you have that focus, you can really eliminate stuff that you don't need to be spending as much time at. And a lot of people have chosen that strategy. So this is choosing a niche. And this is my first thing that I'm giving you guys, is having clarity. The more that you can define exactly where you want to end up, the quicker your way will be to get there. I'm not saying necessarily that it's better, because maybe you might enjoy, or you might be able to put more things together if you understand a broader spectrum of things, right? Some people do everything, some people only do one thing. The people that normally do one thing are really close to the top of that thing. Like they're pretty much leading the way for almost everyone else, because they've just spent so much time examining all the variables of that one thing that you really can't fight with them on that. I mean, they're just on a new level. You're just trying to catch up, but then you're also trying to catch up to another guy doing something else and another guy doing something else. Now, this sounds like a bad strategy, but if you consider the fact that really almost everything in the world is blending now, so music, for instance, they're sampling, or in all kinds of sciences, there's people that are coming in that are outsiders because they have a new perspective and they unlock something that was previously locked. So you can't really say which strategy is better. I can only say that one is faster than the other. If you chase one thing only and you have a long-term vision, you'll get there faster because you'll just see improvement and you'll be building one thing only. It's like if you had to build a city and you start with a tower and you just really build that tower, and then you start afterwards building out some of the houses around it, maybe making another tower at some point, right? But you start from a solid base. You have one thing that you're good at, one thing that if you're looking for work will get you hireable, and just something that when people see it and you know for yourself, okay, this is something that I can do. So you can have that place of strength if you do one thing only. Now the other side of the coin is that if you do many things, you could potentially blend stuff in a way that hasn't been done before. So the broader your knowledge base, and same city, let's say, the analogy of the same city, you're building up all kinds of infrastructures in there. So you're not really sure if some of those houses may not decide to build up a crazy weird tower that wouldn't have been there before. So if you just went for one thing immediately, you took a template of, let's say, environment, you took a template of characters or whatever it may be, and you build that thing up, it is there. But I would say that if you added more things to it, like surrounding things, you could probably make that tower look pretty freaky, right? So for instance, if you just have, I'm gonna do characters, and you learn your anatomy, you learn your props, you learn all that stuff, drapery, whatever. You can paint and you can do characters. Let's say you do that. Then let's say you also get interested in robotics. Then you kind of become Anthony Jones, who does almost exclusively characters, and some of them are horror, so he does organic, but he also does hard surface, robot looking stuff. So then you combine those and you get weird fashion, hard surface, robots plus horror. So that is a very unique sort of thing. Thinking about it, I really can't think of anyone whose style is similar. If I see an Anthony Jones piece, I'll probably know it. I'll know it because because his values are very, not only are they super photorealistic, they're also painterly. So that's a person that's practiced one thing for a very long amount of time and developed it to a super high level. And he also developed a style. So he had a long-term goal. He had that focus that I talked about. The focus was characters, right? And his focus on his tool is painting mostly. So he's also branched out and done 3D and all that stuff, but those are the two main focuses. Combine those and then combine some smaller side interests. You have that big tower that we talked about, and you have a couple of smaller towers. Now those combined together, you get the freaky, crazy Anthony Jones tower. Now here's what I would consider my mistake, is that I don't really have subject matter that I'm focused on. So I don't really have a long-term anything. My short-term stuff is pretty much trying to find what are the trade-offs, right? So if I decide to learn design early on, so let's say in year one, I start focusing on design. And design, by the way, is the thing that when I said earlier that I found the universe of suck, well, for me, that right now is design. So I've been putting that thing off for as long as I possibly could. I tried to mask it by learning 3D, by learning fancy software, by finding all kinds of ways to combine all kinds of different things. So I could try and make fancy visuals, let's say, but there really was no design there. So I was focused on what's the best way to make images. That's how I would define it to myself. At the time, you're just doing one thing and then another thing. But what the broader topic was, how can I just make images that look complex? How can I get the most amount of visual interest, let's say, in the least amount of time? So that's where, for instance, I'd be comparing 3D to 2D and testing out, let's say, something like Maya or Modo versus ZBrush or something else. So it's just which way of working is best and what gives you, it's really, most of it is tools though. So if you think about it, a lot of this stuff, it doesn't really have anything behind it. There's no principles. I am finding things out and I am learning, but I'm learning mostly tools. So let's say if I learned design in my first year, what's the trade-off? And I know this video is probably going to be really confusing, but it's because there's really no way to say long-term, which is better. I'm only just reiterating this to say, I can say that if you have a focus and a goal, so if you just narrow it down, you'd be able to get there faster. The reason being is that there's rabbit holes all over the place. And one of the biggest, what I would call a mistake, is that you could go down some route that you didn't have to go to. So if your thing was characters or environment, do you have to know perspective, let's say, for either of those? Answer is yes. How well do you have to know it though? And what's the purpose of the tool? Those are the two most important questions. So you could spend, let's say, 6 to 8 months on perspective, whereas in fact maybe you only needed to spend about a week. It's not that you'd know it within a week, but you didn't really have to learn all the different station points. And when does a cube become a cube? How can you possibly define or do an architectural drawing of when something is a square? Like when you're making your grid, how do you know where to cut it off so that it's a perfect square? I spent months on that stuff. I still have folders of things about the cone of vision and how you would just have an architectural plan and project it. I can't do any of this stuff now, and there was no purpose to learning it. I just didn't know how well I should learn it. So I went down a rabbit hole, and that cost me some time. To confuse you even more though, I'm gonna say that I don't necessarily consider that as lost time, because I got to actually figure out how to deconstruct problems. But the more rabbit holes you go down, the longer it's gonna take. So if time is something that is a pressure for you, and for most of us it is, there's jobs, there's bills, there's just whether you're gonna make it or not. So you do wanna know that you're doing the right thing. The longer you spend in rabbit holes and the less focus you have, the longer your journey is gonna take. Long term, again, maybe it might pay off in a better way because it'd be more versatile, or maybe you'd find ways to combine things that didn't exist before. But in the short term, and especially if you need ignition, if you need to get started quickly, if you need to be a pro within a few years, then the only way to do that is to have crystal clear clarity, or just start with one thing and eliminate everything else and just patiently wait until you're good at one thing and then start expanding, which is the strategy of a lot of people. Like for instance, John Park almost doesn't do any 3D, right? So he's focused on design. So he's been doing, I would call this, the second thing would be principles versus tools, right? So this guy's been learning about things that whether you change the tool or not, this guy can still make designs. So if he learned 3D, he'd make awesome 3D. He doesn't really use it very much though, because he can convey his ideas without it. So he can do it without the fancy tools. Whereas I tried to go and mask my lack of knowledge, and also because it's insecurity too. Like if I'm really honest, I'd have to say that when I started painting, I just wanted to learn to paint. And then I didn't also want to have to, and I couldn't even draw the line between painting and design. I just thought if you make a picture, that's it. So when I started copying things and I could make a picture, I didn't know what really was expected. I didn't realize that you had to be able to do a lot of this stuff from your head. So what is actual learning versus what I think should be enough. This video is kind of a rabbit hole. So what I'm trying to do is just, I don't want to put you off of whatever it is that you're doing. Because if I say do this versus that, and you're doing something completely different, you may be right. And that's the point, is that a lot of times when you learn something, it's not utilizable right now. So for instance, when I started, I was learning anatomy before I even started learning to draw. So I knew where all the muscles were, where they attached. I knew it better than I know it now, because now I've forgotten tons of it, because I didn't have the tools to be able to use that knowledge. So I knew where all the muscles were, where they attach, what they're for, etc. I could look at them and immediately recognize all the tendons, all the different things, all the bones. And then I couldn't really use that. And if you've seen my video on figure drawing versus anatomy, this is really what I'm talking about. It's the use of a tool versus a practice, right? So the practice is the figure drawing. The practice is, can you create something that can use the anatomy? Because if you can't, then all you have is just like a chart in your head, but it's not really applicable to drawing yet. So fast forward, let's say 2 to 3 years, when I learn how to sculpt, or when I find a tool that finally enables me to use that anatomy, that's not really lost. It's still there for me. It's just that I couldn't use it in the interim. So like there was a gap of 2 to 3 years that, okay, I know anatomy and I spent tons of time on it, but I can't do anything. And in those 3 years is when you may think, okay, I've screwed up, because I really shouldn't have learned that at all. I should have first done tons of figure drawings, figured out perspective, learned the principles, and then learned the tool of anatomy. So the sequencing may seem like it's off, but at the same time, you just unlock it a few years down the road. And I might also say that your brain has had enough time to consolidate all the info, and you've looked at anatomy so much with a knowing eye that when you look at it again 3 years down the road, you have 3 years of experience, whereas otherwise you just start and learn anatomy later on, and then you don't really have, your brain needs time to process stuff. So you haven't really had that much time to consolidate. So it's not as strong. You can't recognize it immediately, or you can be creative with it, let's say, because you just haven't had that time for your brain to just put all the patterns together and figure out what all the different combinations. So your anatomy may be more interesting if you've done it first and then learn tools. But maybe the right way is to learn your tools first, so then you can actually create a story, and then you put anatomy on top of that, and then you have something even better, something sellable. Very confusing. So I'm gonna do a quick summary of what I think is probably the most confusing thing I've ever recorded. It's confusing because the path is confusing. And I think really when I think about being self-taught versus going to a school, yes, there are things that the school can help you with, but really even if you're in the best school, no one can really give you what you want to do. So art is extremely individual. A doctor, let's say, or almost any profession, would train in a way that's replicable. You want any doctor you go to be able to treat your cold or your broken bone. Like, they all must be able to recognize the same stuff and apply the right thing. So that's very predictable. With art though, you want everyone to be doing a different thing. You don't want anyone to be like everyone else. And even just the people that I have on here that I was going to show you as reference, when you just look at their stuff, regardless of what I click on, it's going to be different to what everyone else has in some way. There's going to be similarities, but a lot of it is going to be really different. And you can tell exactly who's who. There's no mistaking Vitaly Bulgarov for anyone else. There's no mistaking Anthony Jones. There's no mistaking Maciej Kuchara or Jama. Those are people that have developed their own techniques though. And so Vitaly and Jama and Maciej, as far as I know, they're self-taught. And we have here James Park, and we also have James Pack. They went to Art Center, right? So they went to the best school. They're all pros. Their stuff is all amazing, and they work in completely different ways. So the three self-taught guys, they use 3D, they use painting, and then the two guys that went to Art Center, I think they mostly use 2D. So their design foundation, I think, was so strong that they didn't really need to learn the fancy tools because they had the principles under their belt. They knew exactly what they need to do to make something interesting. Whereas I think maybe with us, when you're self-taught, maybe it takes a little bit longer, and maybe you're exploring more things just because you're not really sure how anything works, and there's no one to really show you, well, I think you should do this, or I think maybe you should do that. So there's no one to do that for you. It's up to you to find anything out. But the point is that regardless of which side you're on, these are all approaches that have worked, right? The self-taught guys have made it, and the guys that went to the best school, they've also made it too. So what that means is that it's a validation of both strategies. So you can't really say this one is better and this one is worse. You shouldn't do that, you should do this. So the reason why this video is so confusing is because if you're doing something that is completely against maybe what I'm saying right now, it may be that this is also valid. So I don't want you to feel like your effort is invalidated. And in fact, when I do find a weakness, when I do find something that, okay, I have avoided this thing for so long, I need to step up now, I need to get this sorted out. When I find that, that's not pleasant in the moment, but ultimately it's the best possible thing that could happen to me, because with it comes my ability to actually be solid, right? Not to just have crutches, not to just have 3D, or not to just put some crazy shader or just wire something somehow together, photo bash it, whatever it is, to make it look fancy but really have nothing to say, or is just constructed in such a crazy complex way that it makes no sense. So you've overcomplicated something because you didn't know how to say it simply, like this video. Everything is a trade-off. If you decide to do one thing, you have to let go of something else. And the sequencing, essentially, is what decides how fast you get to where you want to go to. If you're not bothered by time, and this is kind of my strategy, I do want to get there, but but I'm not particularly concerned when. It is a nagging, constant thought, just like with almost everyone else, but I'm okay with it taking longer because the way that I'm developing stuff is interesting to me. I'm happy to be learning 3D. I'm happy to be learning to sculpt. I'm happy to be learning to combine software. I'm happy to be learning design now. I'm happy to be learning about all the different things that I don't know. And it's been a dream to me since before I started to be able to use art to learn about the world, right? That's what I wanted before I even started. When I was asking myself, what should I be doing? I just had this idea that I like learning. And this has offered me nothing but that continuously every single day. So I'm happy that it's taken me a long time, because to me that translates into, well, let's say that I'm not a pro in 3, I'm a pro in 5 years, perhaps. I'm gonna enjoy doing this thing though for a very long time after that. It's not the 5-year plan. And maybe I say that I don't really see very far down the line. But I also ask myself, within 20 years maybe, would I still like doing this? And if it's as broad as it is now, and it's probably going to get even broader, then I think the answer would be yes. Whereas if I narrowed everything down, I don't think that I would want to do it for as long as I possibly would like to do it now. I think that I could put myself in a rut somewhere. So that focus could in itself become a rabbit hole, right? So that's why the video is confusing. It's because the path's confusing, and it's because everything is a dichotomy. Do everything too much, push it too far ahead, and leave everything else behind. And this tower, like the one tower we talked about in your little city that you're building, that tower could fall down, or it could get attacked by barbarians, and you can't build it anymore. You may just get burnt out. You may just get to the point where, okay, this doesn't work for me. So my advice would be, 1, have clarity. Have clarity about what you like, but don't feel bad about wasted time. If you have been learning things that you can't really use right now and you feel like you've made mistakes, all you have to realize is that you're missing the one piece that's going to unlock that skill for you. You're just missing 1 or 2 things that you need just to be able to do that. The example of anatomy again, if you just can't draw, or if you can't sculpt, you can't use the anatomy. But as soon as you have those 2, then this immediately becomes accessible. And something that you couldn't do at all before now is like 10 times better, because you're now utilizing this hidden atom bomb that you had been saving, this anatomy thing. Like, you knew everything about where everything is to go, you just couldn't possibly visually articulate it. Then all of a sudden you unlock that, this gets unlocked as well, boom, your work gets 10 times better immediately. So clarity, know what you're doing and know what you want, and then you have a beacon that'll draw you towards it, and your work in the short term at the very least will skyrocket. Number 2 that I didn't really get to talk about too much is learn principles over techniques. So don't focus on tools and technique too much, I would say. There are benefits to 3D, there are benefits to using all of the new stuff that people are doing, but if you don't really know what to do with it, and if you can't design, let's say, or if you don't have a focus for your subject matter, you can't really use those very much. It's because you're learning all this complex stuff that does take months, and this is my thing that I do. But at the same time, if you can't design, so if I can sketch something out, I can't really make it in 3D. So just because I know 3D, if my design sucks, I really can't do that. I can't possibly realize the design, because there is no design. I just can't do that. So I'm lacking that principle, that like basic knowledge to be able to unlock the tool. The same thing that I just talked about. So I have these tools, and again, I'm not saying I've done a bad thing, because I have the atom bomb, right? I have this super powerful tool, and as soon as I get the principle, I'll be able to bomb it with all the stuff that I've learned. So I would say though that sequence is kind of messed up. So if you think about it, you do something, then you have to wait for it to be done by unlocking some. That's a weird way to do stuff. And it happens in my mind because I just don't know how to sequence stuff properly. If you do the principles first, like you learn your design and then you find your subject matter, if you do that stuff first, then it'll be much easier for you. Everything will work synergistically, everything will be together, so that you just build one thing on top of the other thing and you're just moving at a steady pace. Otherwise, you kind of have this thing here, but you're down here, and then it's a weird stepping stone kind of way to be doing everything. And the final thing I would say is just to be honest. Don't try and mask your weaknesses by just doing a fancy something. It really almost never is about that. And you can't really hide, and I don't think you really should try to. You shouldn't try to hide anything, because it's just gonna hurt you in the long run. You may want to avoid certain things because they're painful, because you suck at them. But at the same time, if you just sweep it under the rug and you try and do all kinds of other things, this thing is still there and it's still holding you back. So you can't really, any learning that you do, if you are deciding not to do something just because it's hard, any of this stuff couldn't possibly be fully used, just because the problem is still there waiting for you. So you can't really hide from it. And the only way in my mind to legitimately improve is to just do everything that's necessary. You can't eliminate a problem by attacking things around it just because they're more comfortable. If there's a big brick wall, then it's the big brick wall that needs to go down. You can't just knock down the things around it and hope that the wall would also fall. Now, having said that, maybe you're weakening the wall by doing those other things and they will help, but ultimately you are gonna have to face whatever it is that you don't wanna do. That thing that you're procrastinating on, that you are avoiding because it's painful and uncomfortable, you are gonna have to do that thing. In my experience, it's been 100% of the time. All the things that I've wanted to put off, that I've wanted to not have to do, and mask with other things that I'll learn because they seem to be better, it's never worked out that way. I've wanted to, once I could paint a little bit, well, I don't really have to sketch, right? I don't really have to learn to do any of this stuff. So like sketching is before painting, right? That's how it seems, because you have line, then you have paint. So if you go to paint, what's the point of doing the sketch stuff? Well, the point of doing the sketch stuff is that you can actually get designs down a lot faster and you can work them out. And if you neglect learning design completely, then you don't understand the purpose of sketching and you're just trying to go down this other pathway, let's say, so painting, 3D, etc., rendering stuff. So I'm trying to make complex images, but the very heart, like the very structure of this thing, it's the basic sketching. It's the thing that I wouldn't want to do because I thought, well, this is lesser than these other things. I shouldn't really do that because I can do it with fancier tools. But simplifying turns out to be better. I think I'm actually gonna stop now because I'm hoping to, what I want to do with this video is to just let you know, if you're doing something different, it's not necessarily wrong, but be honest with yourself, and in fact, it could be a benefit. So be honest with yourself though. If you're only doing that thing to save yourself from the hard stuff that you have to do, or if you do have a legitimate strategy and you're testing it out. If you do that, I think that you can't really go wrong because you're involved and engaged and you're looking actively for what is the best thing for me to do. Whereas if you're just hoping that you'll stumble into success, I don't think that's really possible. To be able to get there, you need to be ruthless with what your weaknesses are. You're gonna have to expose each and every one and attack it yourself. So the thing in yourself that you don't have to confront, that you don't want to confront, you have to confront. The thing in yourself that you yourself don't want to face, that's the thing that you have to expose and go for it, because this is the fastest way to improve. So number 1, have clarity and have focus. Number 2, learn principles over techniques. And number 3, be ruthlessly honest with what you're avoiding and go for your weakness mercilessly, even though that's the hardest thing to do because you want to stay safe. And the reason why it's a weakness is because you've never trained it. And the reason you've never trained it is because you didn't want to confront that you have a weakness. So get rid of that vicious cycle and get to work and get it done. It's the only way that at least I can think of that you'll be consistently improving and getting as much benefit as possible, not only in the short term, but in the long term too. I hope this video helped. I hope it confused you, because I really don't know how else to feel but confused about most of this stuff. And I hope that if you've been doing something that most other people have said not to do, maybe you might reconsider. And instead of feeling bad about it, maybe you could realize that this is something that you could use. Maybe not right now, but maybe once you unlock a few things, maybe this will be your new weapon. Let me know how you guys may have messed up. Let me know where you messed up your sequence. Let me know what your weakness is, and let's get this thing done. I'll see you soon.